Hello, you're through the Books Boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling? Go ahead.
Oh, hi, I'm Michael Cooper.
Michael, it's such a pleasant surprise you would call in because we were just chatting about your book here. I have it here, you'll see. Wages of Empire. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good.
Lovely morning here on the West Coast.
Good. I've got a nice rainy afternoon here in Ireland.
My condolences.
Yeah, they're needed. We thought spring was coming and it has not come yet. So I was just chatting about your book, and it's interesting. A lot of the times we'll review books, and sometimes we get some classics, and sometimes we get, first-time authors and things like that. This is not your first book. You've written what looks to be multiple books in this same area. This kind of when you lived in Jerusalem yourself, right? So you've written books
Yeah.
surrounding that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you into writing about that area?
Well, as you mentioned, I did live in Jerusalem. I emigrated after high school, and I lived in Jerusalem when it was still a divided city between Israel and Jordan in 1966. Um, I spent a year learning Hebrew. Then afterwards, I went to
Wow.
university there, and uh, the Six-Day War was certainly an interesting moment in history from the standpoint of the electric feeling in the air,
Mm,
anxiety at the time that was building. Given the stakes at hand, it was truly an existential moment in Israel's history and the region's history. Um, the war was blessedly short, and clearly not without plenty of sacrifices. But be
sure.
that it may, it didn't drag on and on like so many horrific conflicts that we're actually currently experiencing, both in the Middle East as well as in Europe,
Even
sadly.
today, yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me because I remember way back in high school we do study World War One here, but we really only look at sort of Western Front stuff. And a big theme of this book is, well, there's going to be this kind of Middle Eastern front set up, and a lot of fighting's going to start happening here, and there's this big fear that things are going to get really bad and really messy. And that was new to me. It's almost wasn't part of what I knew of World War One at all. Do you think that that gets overlooked a little bit?
Indeed, and the substrate here in this novel, which again, as my others, takes place at major turning points of history, especially as it affects and emanates from the Middle East. What's interesting about the conflict that we now call World War One was the machinations of Kaiser Wilhelm II that had
Mm,
begun actually decades before, despite the fact that he was rather unhinged and a little bizarre in
mm,
his behaviors. He certainly was very methodical in really planning how he wanted to address the inequity that he experienced with the colonial world that he was or wanted to be a part of, as opposed to his cousin George V in England, who had
mm.
an empire I don't need to tell you about, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Uh, the, what had become Imperial Germany, through the efforts of Wilhelm's forebears, this German state, the Second Reich, was largely cut out of empire. They had a bit
Mm.
in Asia and a bit in Africa, but it was paled in comparison with what certainly England, France, and
In
Spain
France, yeah.
enjoyed. They were late to the table, and Wilhelm literally wanted a place in the sun. And since that involved the Arabian oil reserves as well as the Suez Canal, that would obviously be a pivotal area that he was looking to in order to allow him really to control the Black Sea and the egress to the
Mm.
Mediterranean and beyond. And so his plans are very layered in regards not just the geographic issue, but also in the realm of what he anticipated would be truly a Holy Roman Empire that
Yeah.
he would be atop of. And he clearly had viewed the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire with a certain amount of glee, to make it all the easier for him to create a vassal state, in anticipation of winning this
Mm.
European war in 1914 and beyond.
Mm.
And
Certainly
so
from
he's
reading the
an
book.
interesting character. And so he really sits right on the cover there, as you noticed,
Yes.
and hovering over sort of a nightmarish view of the old city of Jerusalem. And again, what I really wanted to bring out here was the sense that this was really a conflict that largely was experienced, not just for the Eurocentric of us, but largely the battlefields were in Europe, either the Eastern or Western Front, but clearly the Middle East Front did become a legitimate and important battlefield later on. But beyond that, it was really sort of the centerpiece of what Wilhelm hoped to get out of it. I don't think he wanted to, take over France or Belgium in particular, but
Mm.
what he really wanted was the leverage that winning this war would give him.
Yeah, I mean, from reading the book, that's certainly how it feels. Yes,
Yeah,
he wants to expand, like as you mentioned, some of the other countries have done with their empires, and in particular, he
yeah,
wants Jerusalem, and he wants to kind of be king of Jerusalem, and of course, that's a very important place for religious reasons to multiple religions. But he doesn't appear to want to. Yes, he will end up going to war with the other Western powers, but he doesn't appear to want to. He has no intention of taking over England. He doesn't think he's going to be king of England or something like that. He's happy to
no,
look Eastern in his empire building,
no. No,
I
he had a great
suppose.
deal of affection for Georgie, as he
Yeah.
called him. Yeah, as well as Nikki in Russia.
And I guess that's what happens when you end up with one family ruling most of Europe and then squabbling with each other, and all the countless lives that are wrapped up in that.
Yeah, and destroyed
Yeah.
by it.
So
Yeah.
how much of this would you say, I mean, and you very helpfully at the back, you do give a list of sort of here's the real characters and here's, the fictional aspects. What percentage of this would you say is non-fiction and what percentage is your own sort of story that you've added in?
Well, clearly the fictional characters, that is the portion that exists within the scaffolding of the history. And the history obviously brings with it these amazing characters, whether or not it's Wilhelm or T.
Mm.
Lawrence, Gertrude Bell, and the list
Churchill's
is
in there. Yeah.
absolutely, the list is long and remarkable. So I would say, and obviously, when I have these historical figures speaking, whether or not it's Gertrude Bell or T. Lawrence, because we hear a lot from both of them, uh, a lot of it comes literally from their collected letters,
Hmm.
from different their autobiographical material that exists certainly with Lawrence, as
Yeah.
well as to a degree with Gertrude Bell. So they were absolutely voracious readers, and they were energetic writers of letters. And this is all great material. So
Sure.
when I present their arguments, for example, there's a section there where Lawrence, many sections where Lawrence is really speaking against the whole idea of empire vis-a-vis
Mm.
Britain. This is also going to come out in the sequel to this book, to even a greater degree.
Mm.
But a lot of his arguments are verbatim from what he actually said, and so it was absolutely delightful to be able to weave in the literally not just the literal history, but also the verbiage that
Mm.
was actually rising from these amazing people, and to weave that into a narrative that basically I would say is probably 90% historical and 10% fantastic.
Mm.
And again, there are those elements, and that is part of the network of scaffolding that exists that I have to respect to a large degree.
Sure.
Where I do vary from it, I certainly acknowledge. And one area in particular that I had to really kind of change because it was just too frustrating is the way that Faisal and his father Hussein were being courted by McMahon and Kitchener uh,
Hmm.
for months and months, actually for years. but they were very reticent. That is the Bedouin princes, Hussein and his son Faisal and others. They were reticent because they were good citizens of this Ottoman Empire, and clearly they enjoyed a certain status, although they, squabbled with the both the old order as well as the Young Turks. But nevertheless, it was much more comfortable for them to go along and get along rather than to be branded as traitors to what was 500-year plus um, establishment in Arabia of the Ottomans.
Yeah.
And so they were reticent to break. And so actually I had to bring it forward by a year or so, this discussion between particular between Hussein and his son Faisal, so that finally there'd be some action, some movement,
Right.
because otherwise they were just, dicking around forever. It was frustrating as hell, so I had to move
Yeah.
it up.
To be honest, they're some of my favorite characters, and because I really liked not even so much their goals or anything, but just their interpersonal relationship. You know, the father-son relationship that Faisal and Hussein have. It's very lovely, and it contrasts with Evan and his father, I think, who
Yeah,
I think there's certainly affection there, but they really aren't getting along in the day to day. And eventually, of course, Evan leaves home and goes to join the war effort, and that that goes how it goes. But it's interesting to me when I saw, okay, he's got a sort of controlling father, and it's actually difficult for me because I studied classics, I studied ancient Greek history, I studied philosophy, some Roman history. I'm interested in literature. So when I look at the things the father's trying to get him interested in, like Xenophon and Josephus, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what you should be making your son read. I've read the Anabasis, I've read the Bellum Judaicum, but
yeah,
then I think, well, the boy doesn't want to really that much. And I think he respects his dad, but he feels a bit put upon, and he's kind of happy to take a chance to flee when he gets it and pretend, well, my friends are going on holidays, I'm going to join them, and then disappear. And when I
yeah.
contrast that with Faisal and Hussein, and they seem to be more affectionate to each other, and the way they speak to each other, and it's quite a lovely contrast,
Yeah,
even
I'm
though
glad.
they're both in dangerous situations.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. Clearly the filial piety it sort of exists in a Middle East family like that, and the way that one treats one's elders is certainly
Mm,
contrasted with the progressive West here.
yeah. And that, again, everything's got pros and cons, I suppose, but eventually Faisal gets sent off to play his part as well. And I don't know, do you think is his dad trying to keep him safe? He's supposed to do a bit of infiltration and learn some things, but he's not in immediate danger a lot of the time. I mean,
Obviously, as long as they're staying under the radar, so to speak, in regards to what the Ottomans know about their correspondence, obviously it was, literally sewn into the hems of garments, and the way these missives were communicated at that point, it was very secretive and
mm,
and, and under the weather, and literally whether or not it was in sword hilts or in hems of garments, whatever communications were being made either from Egypt to Arabia or elsewhere. It was obviously not something that could easily be intercepted. And so as long as they felt that there was no immediate danger, they were going through the effusive uh, appearances of loyalty to the Ottomans.
yeah,
And so, and clearly when you look at the distances involved and the ability to communicate, just between Istanbul and the Hijaz, Mecca and Medina and all these remote places in the desert, communication wasn't in, days, it was in months.
yeah.
And so, the pace of things obviously developed accordingly. And I think that there was no particular danger as long as they were, pretending to be completely in lockstep with the Ottomans,
Mm.
uh, program there.
And to be fair, Perevan goes off and thinks I'm gonna help with the war effort. And I don't want to give too many spoilers sort of as the book
Yeah.
progresses, but he gets there and he kind of panics and thinks he's maybe made the wrong decision, but he ends up doing some good anyway. But his poor dad, Clive, does go after him and tries to track him down because he's worried
Yeah.
about him. You know, there is still affection there, even though they maybe
Yeah.
don't see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah, well, again, with and this is again another spoiler, with Evan's mother having died in childbirth a couple of years before this book opens, as it's alluded to, and actually that will appear as a prologue in the next book, which is called Crossroads of Empire,
Hmm.
and that will be coming out in the fall, by the way,
Cool.
of this year.
You've
Uh,
preempted
the,
my next question then.
yeah,
Where can we get the
well,
follow-up?
yeah. Well, and it will have more of a sense of that relationship and the void that was left by his mother's death not only in Evan's life, but also in his father's life. And so, clearly, once Evan was gone, Clive was alone, obviously without the ability to control his son, but without his son,
At all.
period,
It's a
full
little bit
stop.
sad, yeah.
That sense of disjointedness and loneliness, especially with what was going on back home, clearly compelled him to go back to England and to join in the effort and also to search for Evan.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well because of course there's very sad scenes and we even get looks in hospitals and things as the book progresses and we see some real sadness with some of the people. And of course it's about World War One, so it's a very politically charged and a lot of death and everything like that. But there's some funny moments as well when Evan arrives and he goes to the cheapest hotel he can find or whatever, and the lady there kind of offers him an escort for the night, and he's very taken aback and very confused. He was not expecting that, and that's a slightly funny moment as well. And he kind of turns it down in the end, and I had a chuckle at that.
Yeah. And all this is, by the way, to a large degree autobiographical.
Okay.
Especially the result of that particular opportunity.
Okay,
Um,
yeah. That was a funny moment for me. And there's some moments of passion as well, or compassion, I should say, when a certain character is supposed to be, let's say, being tortured, and some of the people involved in that really are doing their best to not hurt him and are trying to help him,
yeah.
and without saying too much, but it's very nice to see real human compassion coming out. And that's something that happens in these kind of wars as well, shooting over the heads and trying not to really kill people,
Yeah.
because it's very difficult to take a bunch of people and say, okay, you're now all killing machines, you know?
Yeah. And that was important to me to show, the humanity on
Mm,
both sides of and the many different multifaceted sides of this conflict. And it was also very gratifying, for example, the whole idea of the Christmas truce, which will be in the next book.
hmm.
Obviously this ends, I think, sometime in the I think late summer or autumn of the year, and the next book will pick up around about Christmas. And so the whole
Okay.
idea of the Christmas truce is also extremely poignant and just wonderful to be able to convey. And
Yeah.
it's these moments of shared humanity that really constitute the underpinning of this idea of uh, a world where we not only obviously struggle here down below, but there's this higher elevated ideal of an upper Jerusalem, a place
Mm.
where we meet our better angels and our best
Hmm.
selves. And it's this kind of sense of humanity and decency that I really wanted to bring out.
Cool. And I think that you do that very well. As I say, it's nice to have a book dealing with such serious material that manages to show as well compassion and a little bit of humor with your which I did not realize was your own autobiographical anecdote, but
Well,
so
we write, what we know, and
that's true. That's
obviously,
true.
many of those aspects. For example, as I mentioned, I was in Israel during the run up to the Six-Day War in 1967,
Mm,
and that sense of foreboding was really something I could tap into when I was writing about Evan and as he's moving through France and seeing the unfolding of the actual result of war, what he's seeing on at train stations and whatnot as he's moving towards Paris. And that was something that I could clearly relate to from the standpoint of what I wanted to do, because also when one is in a country like Israel, was at the time fairly isolated. Their only real ally, I think, was France, and that was just despite England and America. But it was, as I mentioned before, an existential moment, and the outcome was uncertain.
Mm,
Thankfully, it was over quickly. And sadly, the result of it didn't lead to what might have been, which many called for, even right after the 67 war, which was a comprehensive peace with the Arab countries that was probably attainable at that time.
mm,
But sadly, there was this sense of euphoria that kind of overwhelmed the Israeli psyche, and
mm.
they really weren't interested in trading land for peace. They wanted to hold on to the land.
Fortunately, I think that, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
age-old story, I think,
Yeah.
in human history. But let me close by asking you, well, two things. Question number one, would you like to just plug your website or tell people where they can get the book, first of all?
The book's available through all the usual suspects in regards to the Amazon, Barnes and
Sure.
Noble. Uh, I have links to a lot of different sites on my website, which is Michael J. Cooper, I think, .net,
Okay,
I
I'll check and
believe.
I'll put a link in the show notes anyway, so that'll be
Yeah,
there.
please. Yeah, thank you. And obviously it's available wherever toys are sold.
Cool. On the last question then, which is going to maybe take you a little bit off guard, but I see you got lovely bookshelves and everything there behind you. So I do ask every author,
Yeah,
if there's one existing book that you wish you'd been the person to write, what would it be?
I think For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh, okay.
When you look at wartime fiction, which again is what we have here with Wages of Empire and its sequel, Crossroads of Empire, uh, the idea of humanity in the crosshairs of war is a poignant and touching and
Mm,
sad and complicated. I mean, it's such an accelerant of history, war, and the
yeah,
intensity of this experience is such that Hemingway, I think, did just a hell of a job in really creating a narrative of humanity in the Spanish Civil War, which was again a very sad and an unfortunate conflict,
sure.
especially in regards to the outcome. But again, and so and when I look at Evan, apart from any projections of my own experience, Robert Jordan, who's the hero of Hemingway's book,
Mm,
is sort of my touchstone from the standpoint of that uh, hero on a journey that ultimately um, may be tragic, but is noble, and obviously gives the reader an opportunity to really experience um, an amazing journey.
thank you very much, Michael. So, thank you so much for calling in. And as I say, we love the book. I'll look out for Crossroads of Empire later in the year and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you very much. And again,
Thanks.
I would appreciate if you actually would get my website correct. I'm not sure I nailed it.
Yes, yes, I'll put the link in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Take care. Bye
Pleasure
bye.
talking with you.